3 people have died in Connecticut and New York from a rare flesh-eating bacteria. Authorities say 2 people in Connecticut became infected and died after swimming in 2 separate locations on Long Island Sound. The virus was also detected in a person who died in Long Island, New York. Officials are investigating to determine if that person contracted the bacteria in New York waters or elsewhere. The Vibrio vulnificus bacteria lives in warm, salty or brackish water and comes from the same family as the bacteria that causes cholera. People with an open wound, such as a cut or scrape, a recent piercing, or a new tattoo are more likely to contract the bacteria. Doctors say it's important to seek treatment quickly if you develop a skin infection after possible exposure. According to the CDC, the bacteria causes an estimated 80,000 illnesses and 10 deaths in the country every year. A cyber hack has left Massachusetts residents with compromised data. It was part of a massive event exposing the data of millions worldwide. Massachusetts health officials were the bearers of bad news for over 130,000 residents. This week, they began mailing warning letters to those enrolled in state-run programs. The data breach happened through a file transfer system called MOVEit, used by the UMass Chan Medical School. MOVEit is used globally by companies to ship large amounts of sensitive data, social security numbers, medical records, and more. Cybersecurity firm MCSoft says the hackers have stolen data from nearly 700 companies and 40 million people worldwide. Massachusetts officials say hacked information included the person's name and maybe their address, social security number, financial accounts information, and protected health data like diagnosis details. A new poll shows almost 2/3 of all voters want Senator Mitch McConnell to resign. That's due to concerns over his age and his ability to perform his duties. This comes at a time when almost 20 U.S. federal lawmakers are at least 80 years old. Here's the story.
Redfield and Wilton Strategies recently conducted a poll for Newsmax. They found that 64% of eligible voters want Republican Senator Mitch McConnell to resign. More Trump voters want McConnell to step down than Biden voters. Asked about McConnell's age and his ability to continue working, 42% of voters said that they were very concerned, 23% were fairly concerned, and only 18% were slightly concerned. The 81-year-old McConnell recently suffered a health scare during a press conference. Almost immediately after starting to speak at the event, he appeared to freeze up. The senator stopped talking and for about 20 seconds only stared straight ahead. This prompted his Republican colleagues in the Senate to assist him. Senator John Barrasso then helped McConnell from the podium and to his office. He later returned for the Q&A, where reporters asked him about the incident.
You find you're fully able to do your job?
Currently, almost 20 congressional lawmakers are at least 80 years old. In the House, 15 representatives are 80 or older, and in the Senate, 4 have reached that age. Those are 90-year-old Democrat Dianne Feinstein, 89-year-old Iowa Republican Chuck Grassley, 81-year-old Vermont Independent Bernie Sanders, and Mitch McConnell. Earlier this year, Senator Feinstein was absent for work for nearly 3 months. She was hospitalized for neurological complications from shingles. And President Biden repeatedly seems to stumble over his words and struggles to finish sentences.
The problem was too many people are working, making too much money. That's not the problem.
Some voters have been calling for age limits and possible cognitive ability checks. However, no plans have been made for either of those. Former President Trump previously said he'd agree on doing such a check, saying he's confident he'd pass.
The IRS employee count is reaching decade-high levels. Hiring at the tax agency has risen by more than 13% over the past year. Here's the story.
IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel says the IRS is close to reaching 90,000 full-time employees. That's according to the Federal News Network. The IRS's 2022 data book shows the agency had 79,000 full-time positions in 2022. This means hiring at the IRS has risen by more than 13% over the past year. The last time the IRS employed more than 90,000 people was 2012. Staffing dipped below 80,000 in 2015 and remained below that level until now. The jump in hiring comes as the tax agency was granted $80 billion under the Inflation Reduction Act last year. Werfel told reporters that the agency is utilizing the funds to make an immediate, meaningful difference to deliver the service taxpayers and the nation deserve. He also pushed back against claims that the IRS intended to boost the number of its armed agents. Republicans have criticized the funding boost, worried that it could lead to an enforcement expansion. The IRS said earlier this year it intends to hire 87,000 new employees over a 10-year period.
Child social media stars in Illinois will now have their earnings protected. Illinois is the first state to pass a law establishing safeguards for minors who are featured in online videos and how they're compensated. Illinois Governor J.P. Pritzker signed the bill into law last Friday. It amends the state's child labor law and allows teens over the age of 18 to take legal action against their parents. That's if they were featured in monetized social media videos and not properly compensated. It's similar to the rights held by child actors. Starting July 1st, 2024, parents in Illinois will be required to set aside 50% of their earnings for a piece of content into a blocked trust fund for the child. This will be based on the percentage of time a child is featured in the video. So if a child is in 50% of a video, they should receive 25% of the earnings. This only applies if the child appears on the screen for more than 30% of family vlogs in a 12-month period. A court has ruled that a New Jersey Catholic school has the right to fire a pregnant, unmarried teacher. The school says she broke their code of ethics on premarital sex. Victoria Criscitello claims she was a victim of discrimination. The school says its actions were in accordance with church teachings. Criscitello attended the St. Teresa School in Kenilworth, New Jersey, and worked there starting in 2011. When the school asked her if she would like to teach art full-time in 2014, she said she would need more pay because she was pregnant. A few weeks later, she was fired and replaced by a married woman with children. The Supreme Court of New Jersey said Criscitello twice signed forms that bound her to follow the school's code of ethics. 9/11 defendants may avoid the death penalty under plea agreements being considered. Families of some of those killed in the terrorist attacks were notified by the Pentagon and FBI this week. It comes 1.5 years after military prosecutors and defense lawyers began exploring a resolution to the case. The suspected architect of the attack and 4 other defendants were captured at various times and places in 2002 and 2003. They were sent to Guantanamo for trial in 2006. Some relatives of the people killed outright in the terror attacks expressed outrage over the possible deal. Prosecutors vowed to consider their views and present them to military authorities before making a final decision. One man who lost a son in 9/11 says he's deeply frustrated the case is still unresolved. The FBI had no comment Wednesday on the letter. A trial date has not yet been set. Target sales are down amid boycotts over LGBTQ products. According to Justin Danhoff, head of corporate governance at Strive Asset Management, the company says its Pride Month displays and products damaged their bottom line. I spoke with Danhoff about Target's profit slip. Justin Danhoff, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Chris, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Justin, tell us about the pushback Target received for selling LGBTQ-related products.
Yeah, so the pushback was strong and severe, and why was it? It's because there's 2 things when it comes to parents that you don't mess with. That's their money and their kids. And Target's merchandise during Pride Month was a direct attack on children. And so for the first time in 6 years, they saw quarterly sales drop this past quarter.
Tell us a little bit more about the effect. What kind of numbers are we seeing?
Yeah, significant. We're talking into the tens of billions of dollars in losses. And again, this happens because Brian Cornell, the CEO, learns lessons very hard. They haven't had quarterly losses like this in 6 years. What happened then? That was when Target opened up their changing rooms and restrooms to anybody of any gender on the subjectivity of what they claimed they were that day. So grown men could go use the same changing room as little girls. That's the last time they saw sales drop. So the lesson here is, why enter the culture wars at all it clearly affects the bottom line.
And how much of these changes to their bottom line are related to overall inflation and price increases that we've been seeing, would you say?
Yeah, there's certainly that's happening across the board. Absolutely. But on the earnings call, Target had to admit what's material. So companies have to tell investors and would-be investors what's material to the company. And they admitted that the backlash to their Pride Month displays and clothing was material and had a material hit to the bottom line.
Now, how is Target balancing the tension between consumers who want LGBTQ products and those who don't?
Well, it's interesting. They did change some of the displays in, reaction to parents that were upset. At some stores, they simply moved them to a different area of the store. So they did take action in response, but they really leaned into it. Look, they fund organizations that tell teachers to not tell parents when kids are transitioning or changing clothes at school to present as a different gender. So while they did make some ostensible changes in the stores, they're still really leaning into their position on these issues.
Tell us about the messages Target received from both Democrat and Republican attorneys general.
Yeah, so they're a target on both sides, and that's just it. Why are they getting letters from Republicans and Democrats on issues that have nothing to do with their core customer base? It's because they've lost focus of their mission. Let politicians fight political battles. Target should simply be providing the best products that their customers want and demand. They don't belong in the political battles or the culture wars. That's what politicians and culture warriors are for.
Now, Justin, we've seen numerous boycotts on companies promoting LGBTQ-related products like Bud Light and now Skittles. Are these boycotts having an effect on the overall corporate environment?
I think so. I think Bud Lighted has actually become a verb. Like, companies don't want to get Bud Lighted right now. And so I think that this was an instance where a Bud Light specifically really lost track of who their customer is, who their customer base is. And that's why the backlash is so profound and so long lasting. And so I do think that corporate America, for a very long time, thought they could offend a segment of the population with impunity. And I think that era is starting to close.
Justin Danhoff, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.